know there's been a lot of talk. Elon Musk, for example, has been talking for a very long time about regulating AI, and that's challenging. What are your thoughts on the idea of how do we even do that? How would we regulate AI?
Yeah, I appreciate the conversations we have around regulation. I shared many of these when I was working during the Obama administration. The same things I can share publicly, I put out in an open letter to the new administration about how we can approach this regulation. I can lay out a couple of those issues. The first easy one, just for people to visualize, not necessarily to implement, is separating the data from the data model. So separating the data from the data model. We can have bias in the data. We can have bias in the data models, the algorithms. But separating those out can give us some purchase in then thinking about what we want to have happen. The data that we collect, think about an easy example where Delta Airlines, where I often find myself, will know my height and my age and maybe where I fly from and to. But then they have their data model that may determine some configuration of that data for their election to give me some other sort of benefit, upgrade, call it. Those separations, I think, are going to be really useful in where we want to regulate. So the data on me and the characteristics of me may, in some sense, become easier to find and therefore somewhat meaningless. But the data model, the behavior I exhibit when I, say, walk past a coffee shop or have a potato chip. Some of these companies will end up knowing more about my physiology than me. Some companies will end up knowing more about my behavior than my own. That is their knowledge. That's a data model. That's increasingly valuable. These companies will be data firms, AI firms, even though they may own airplanes or own coffee stores or make potato chips, because they will have learned about the relationships between these data as represented in the data model. So we then have we have a data model and we have data. We can then look to see where these data models are linked. So these data models can be essentially a set of automations. Will we have these automations operate in discrete units or be linked is a question right now being executed team by team. That people often think about Meta or Google operating as these large organizations, which they certainly are, but really how their technologies get expressed are through the product manager's quarterly objectives and the 18 million programmers around the world that are just working in their own self-interest and their best understanding about how these technologies can be providing value. We, as citizens and as policymakers, can be thinking about where we want to put in circuit breakers. Now, we do this occasionally, and it's kind of implicit in some of our thinking, but we need to make this more and more explicit. So an easy example is the automated car rolling down the street, coming across a crosswalk. So I'm here in San Francisco where I see Zoox cars and Waymo cars about every 10 minutes, testing out the different lighting in the neighborhood. As one of those Zoox cars or Waymo cars comes upon a crosswalk, does it slow down? Does it stop? Or does it keep going, interpreting the light to be a person or a shadow or some random tumbleweed that happened to find its way into the city? That is an instance of a circuit breaker opportunity. Does the driver intervene? Is how we would describe that. That is not just a conversation for the manufacturer. That's a conversation for us as society. Where do we want people to interact? We can place those circuit breakers across a lot of different links of data models, whether that's in autonomous cars or whether that's in the granting of credit.